Maybe the most remarkable thing about the Harry Potter movies is how consistently good they are. With any lengthy series, however, there are going to be problems here and there. Some of these issues or lapses in logic are well known, but others, big or small, don't really get any attention. With that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 12 problems with the Harry Potter movies nobody admits. 12. Harry, Ron and Hermione's Midnight Stroll, the Philosopher's Stone. Every Hogwarts student knows they are forbidden to roam around the school at night, and as such, Harry usually wears his invisibility cloak during his many nighttime adventures around the castle. However, after being introduced to Hagrid's new pet, a dragon named Norbert, the main trio stroll back through the castle in the dead of night without a care in the world. They don't even bother to keep their voices down as they head back to Gryffindor Tower, and Harry also conveniently forgets his father's invisibility cloak. If Harry, Ron and Hermione had been more cautious during this scene, it would have been a lot more believable. It doesn't ruin the plot of the movie or anything, but it's still rather odd that the filmmakers didn't recognize this rather obvious blunder. 11. Voldemort's Death, The Deathly Hallows Part 2. The Dark Lord's death is strange, to say the least. The terrific exchange between Harry and Voldemort written by J.K. Rowling is replaced with an entertaining, if rather cheesy, action sequence which ends with the two characters locked in battle. This is all perfectly fine, but Voldemort's demise makes no sense whatsoever. After Harry claims his opponent's wand, the Dark Lord starts to deteriorate. His body crumbles into an ash-like substance which floats away into the sky. The only possible explanation is that Voldemort was so dehumanized that he wasn't able to die normally. Regardless of why the filmmakers thought this was an acceptable way to finish the Dark Lord, it would have been much more striking if his body had remained intact and Harry was forced to look at the lifeless form of his arch nemesis. 10. Percy's Estrangement, The Order of the Phoenix. Percy Weasley is probably the least popular member of the Weasley family, and this is understandable. He's pompous, annoyingly ambitious, and obsessed with following rules. Percy occasionally makes an appearance in the first 3 movies, but in The Goblet of Fire, he simply disappears from the story. In The Order of the Phoenix, he has no dialogue, but he does crop up regularly alongside Cornelius Fudge. The issue is that there's no explanation given about Percy's transformation from a loyal member of the Weasley family into the minister's assistant. We're supposed to just accept that he's sided with the corrupt politicians. In the books, it's actually explained, but in the films, we get nothing. 9. Harry's first Quidditch match, The Philosopher's Stone. Madam Hooch might be the worst referee in the history of magical games and sports. She starts Harry's first Quidditch match with a blow from her whistle and then disappears for the rest of the game. The Slytherin's tactics are barbaric, to say the least. Oliver Wood is walloped with a bludger, and Angelina Johnson is forced into the stands by 2 of her opponents. Both of them are rendered unconscious, and yet Madam Hooch does absolutely nothing in response to these illegal actions. While the violence of the Slytherin team is rather amusing, they really shouldn't have been allowed to get away with it. Their actions are totally illegal in the context of the sport, yet for whatever reason, neither Madam Hooch nor any of the other teachers did anything to stop them. 8. Lumos Maxima, The Prisoner of Azkaban. Most Harry Potter fans agree that The Prisoner of Azkaban is the best movie in the franchise. Unfortunately, this terrific film doesn't get off to a particularly good start. Just before the opening titles, the camera zooms into Harry's bedroom, and we see him underneath the covers with his schoolwork. In order to see what he's doing, he uses the incantation Lumos Maxima. Yet, even a casual Harry Potter fan could tell you that the use of underage magic outside of school is forbidden. In fact, in the previous movie, Harry was given a severe warning by the Ministry just because Dobby performed a hover charm in the Dursleys' living room. It's a fun scene, and a good demonstration of the Dursleys' dislike of magic, but it also contradicts all the established rules of the universe for very little payoff. 7. Snape and the Prophecy, The Half-Blood Prince / The Deathly Hallows. One of the more overlooked chapters in the Harry Potter series is The Seer Overheard. In this chapter, Harry learns from Professor Trelawney that it was Snape who told Voldemort about the prophecy. In the movies, on the other hand, this significant piece of information is simply left out. And while Snape's memories are adapted relatively well, they lack that extra emotional punch. In Rowling's version, Snape feels responsible for Lily's death because his information led Voldemort to hunt down the Potters. In other words, he's dealing with guilt as well as loss. This is a key aspect of why he agrees to protect Harry. He's redeeming himself while simultaneously making sure Lily did not die in vain. 6. Helena Ravenclaw and the Location of the Diadem, The Deathly Hallows Part 2. Toward the end of the second part of the Deathly Hallows, Helena Ravenclaw tells Harry the diadem is located in the place where everything is hidden, the Room of Requirements. But how would she know this? It's very unlikely that Voldemort told her because he was so protective over his Horcruxes. The book version of events, though more complex, is much more satisfactory. Back in The Half-Blood Prince, Harry is shown a memory which involves Tom Riddle asking Dumbledore for a job. Later on, Harry hides his copy of advanced potion making in the Room of Requirement, and purely by chance, he covers the hiding place with a wig and a tiara to make it more distinctive. After speaking with Helena during the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry comes to the sudden realization that Voldemort hid the diadem the night he asked Dumbledore for a job, and that the tiara he'd used to hide his potions book the previous year was in fact the diadem. Granted, there is a fair bit of luck involved with such a revelation, but at least there's a reasonable explanation given, whereas in the movie, we're supposed to just accept the fact that Helena knows where Voldemort hid her mother's diadem. 5. Death Eaters attack the Burrow. The Half-Blood Prince. For those who are not familiar with the 6th Harry Potter novel, Harry's visit to the Burrow during the Christmas holidays is pretty quiet. He discusses his suspicions about Malfoy with Lupin and Mr. Weasley, and enjoys the time away from the school with the other Weasley kids. In the movie adaptation, on the other hand, his holidays are ruined by a random attack from Bellatrix Lestrange and Fenrir Greyback. The pair of them attempt to destroy the Burrow, and Harry and Ginny chase them into the surrounding countryside. Though the scene is fine as a standalone action sequence, it's also completely nonsensical. Like most buildings connected with the Order, the Burrow was given extra protection, defensive spells and enchantments to prevent unwanted visitors from wreaking havoc. As such, Bellatrix and Greyback should not have been able to arrive at the Burrow, let alone destroy it. Also, why didn't Voldemort come himself? If the Burrow was so easily accessible, it would have been an ideal place to try and take Harry whilst he was away from the protection of Dumbledore. 4. Barty Crouch Jr.'s escape from Azkaban. The Goblet of Fire. Barty Crouch Jr.'s backstory is fascinating. The way Rowling ties together the Quidditch World Cup, the disappearance of Bertha Jorkins, and the events of Harry's 4th year at Hogwarts is superb. Whilst it would be tricky to cover everything in the movie adaptation, the lack of explanation here is unforgivable. Harry knows who Barty Crouch Jr. is because of his venture into the Pensieve, but there are no details given about how he escaped from Azkaban or how he managed to communicate with the Dark Lord. To make matters worse, Crouch's fate is left rather ambiguous. The implication is that he's sent back to Azkaban, but in the book, he has his soul sucked out by Dementors due to the ineptitude of Cornelius Fudge. The book version is much more logical because it explains why he doesn't appear in any of the later entries. All things considered, the butchering of Crouch's fascinating story was a massive mistake. A 10-minute flashback would have made for an interesting sequence in one of the more mediocre Harry Potter movies. 3. The effect of the Polyjuice Potion. The Chamber of Secrets / the Goblet of Fire / the Deathly Hallows. When adapting a novel, there are always going to be changes to the source material. Some aspects of the original story will be altered or removed, and new things will also be added. Unfortunately, the filmmakers complicated the Polyjuice Potion purely for the sake of it. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry and Ron both take the Polyjuice Potion, and in terms of their appearances, they look exactly like Crabbe and Goyle. But for reasons that are never explained, they retain their original voices. While this does lead to a few comedic moments, there was really no need to impose this rule. That rule is then abandoned in the Goblet of Fire when Barty Crouch Jr. transforms into Mad-Eye Moody. But in both halves of the Deathly Hallows, the filmmakers revert back to the rule established in the Chamber of Secrets. This can be seen during the Battle of the Seven Potters and during the Gringotts heist. It would have been much easier if the filmmakers had just stuck with Rowling's version of the potion. This would have avoided any inconsistencies and saved a job for the sound department. 2. The Marauder's backstory. The Prisoner of Azkaban. Toward the end of The Prisoner of Azkaban, the truth about Sirius Black is revealed. The audience learns that Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew, and that it was he who betrayed Harry's parents and murdered a street full of muggles, not Sirius. And Lupin also reveals that he's a werewolf, which is why he's been missing classes. However, the details of this backstory are never explored. You wouldn't know from watching the film who created the Marauders map, or why they knew so much about Hogsmeade and the Hogwarts grounds. Most frustratingly, those who haven't read the book will not know that Harry's Patronus, which takes the shape of a stag, is the same animal James Potter transformed into as an animagus. It's a shame because The Prisoner of Azkaban is a terrific movie, yet the filmmakers managed to miss out what many Potter fans consider to be the best backstory in the entire franchise. 1. Harry doesn't do any magic in his first year, the Philosopher's Stone. As ridiculous as it might sound, Harry doesn't actually do any magic in his first year at Hogwarts. In fact, the only time he successfully casts a spell is whilst he's trying out wands in Ollivander's shop. If you watch the Philosopher's Stone closely, you'll notice that Hermione does all the major spell work. She uses her considerable talent to fix Harry's glasses, unlock doors, set Snape's robes on fire, petrify Neville, and take down the Devil's Snare whilst beneath the trapdoor. Even Ron does more than Harry, because at least he uses Wingardium Leviosa to take down the troll on Halloween. It's really hard to believe the filmmakers didn't spot this crucial misstep at some point. Sure, Harry still has a lot to do in the first movie. He plays Quidditch and is incredibly brave when he fights Quirrell, but given he's the title character of a story about being a young wizard, he really should have performed some actual magic at some point. And there you have it, folks. 12 problems with Harry Potter movies nobody admits. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.